We are co-sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Eddie Chazan, L'Fur Shalema for Shoshana Bas Penina, Simone Bas Rachel, co-sponsored by Binyamin Rivlin, Lili Nishmas Yitzhak Ben Avram Yehuda Alevi, and co-sponsored by Shelley Zeitlin for the schus of his children, Eli, Orit, and Ora, by Berich Gowassel for Shalema for Moshe Meir Ben Esther Fradel and Dov Meir Ben Chai Gittel, Akar Satayv to the share, and by Shalom Fogel, Le'ilui Nishmas, Rabbi Yaakov Zeb ben Yehuda Aryeh, Rivka Bas Yaakov Yosef, Tziv Yemirim Bas Gad, and Yosef ben Sion ben Yaakov Zev, that the neshama should have an aliyah. We welcome in Shalom Fogel, Mo Kushner, Yetzi Fuchs, Ruvain Shanet, Nachman Chapler, Saba, Dr. Block, Eddie Chazan, Shelley Zeitlin, Berish Gesserman, Dov Salkowitz, Baruch Ian, Irving Fishman, Dr. Guy, and Barry Cement, Stephen Holtzman, Chaim Kramer, Yeshua Shmuel Eisenberg. Great job today, Yeshua Shmuel. A.B. Spry, Rabbi Yaakov Warman, Rabbi Kranz, Avigdor Miller. Good to have Avigdor Miller. Rabbi Avigdor Fried. It's okay to be mistaken for Avigdor Miller, Rabbi Avigdor Miller. Rabbi Avigdor Fried. Avigdor, I was a little worried you weren't here last night. I was a little worried. Gedalia Engel, Michael Chavin, Naftali Jablin, Ilya Shutman, Moshe Lehman, Avram Rezepkowitz, Abe Arbach. And we are holding, and I'm sorry I kept you waiting, Rabbi Isai, it was a recruiting mission. I ate a meal tonight with our longtime Talmud, Mark Rosenblum, who left Staten Island and moved to Baltimore, and I'm trying to get him back to join the shir. It looks maybe promising that we could get those, of course, like Irving and Victor and Barry. They all remember our good friend Mark. So hopefully we'll get him back to the shir. Okay, we are holding 3 lines from the bottom of Daf Ayin Amid Beis. Ochal kol machal, if the Ben Sarah Meira ate any food but v'lo achal basar, but he didn't eat meat, let me just mute him. Shasa yayin, shasa kol mashka v'lo shasa yayin. Any other beverage but not wine, he doesn't become a Ben Sarah Meira. Well, achal kol machal v'lo achal basar, that comes to include even if he eats something of an intoxicating nature. La'asiyeh devela kilis. Devela kilis was a type of date that was very, very intoxicating. You know, when you ate it, you became high. Not the date, the pressed fig. Devela kilis. A person ate these figs, they became high. And some people used to lick stamps and become high on the stamps. Some people smelled paint and they became high on the smell. So even if he ate the pressed figs, he doesn't become a Ben Sarah. So we would think that what beverage does it include? That even if he drinks beer, but the Gemara says to include honey and milk. You know, people drink hot milk to fall asleep. So honey and milk could be intoxicating. The Tanya, achal devela keilis, if somebody had these keilis variety of pressed figs, v'shasad vash v'chalav, or drank honey and milk, v'nichnas l'migdash, and entered to the migdash where you're not supposed to be inebriated, chayiv, you're chayiv. The din is that for going into the Beis Hamikdash in an intoxicated state, there's misa b'dei shamayim, death at the hands of heaven. Einoi nasa ben Sarah Amayra, he doesn't become a ben Sarah Amayra, ad sheyochel basar v'yishta yayin, until he eats meat and drinks wine. Tan Rabbanan, ochel kol machal, if he ate any other food, v'lo yachal basar, but he didn't partake of meat. Shasa kol mashka, he drank any beverage, v'lo shasa yayin, ein nasa ben Sarah Amayra, doesn't become the rebellious and wayward child, ad sheyochel basar v'yishta yayin, unless he eats meat and drinks wine. Shenema zolel v'sovei, right? Gluttonous and a drunkard. And even though there's no direct proof that Zolel and Sove refers to meat and wine, there is a hint to it in Divrei Nevi'im. Zeichel Davar, shenemer al tehi b'sove yayin, don't be from the guzzlers of wine, b'zaylei basar lamai, from those that are gluttonous with meat. V'aymer, and there's another pasuk, ki sove b'zaylel, because he is drunk and gluttonous, yivaresh, it becomes impoverished, he becomes, that the lashon of being poor, he becomes poor. Ukraim talbish numa, and the one who is numa is from a lashon of slumbering. The one who slumbers will, if he becomes such a drunkard that he's always sleeping in the Bowery, kraim talbish numa, he'll end up wearing tatters. He won't be able to afford good clothing. The Gemara tells us, Amar Reb Zeira, kol hayoshin bebeis hamedrash, whoever sleeps during the shir, there are people that, they have a good shluff during the shir, Torah nasis like crime. His Torah will be like tatters. He'll have holes in his learning because he slept through the shir. Shenamar u'krayim, it'll be like tatters, talbish numa, will be worn by one who slumbers. So if you're going to keep on falling asleep in the shir, your Torah will have a lot of holes in it. Again, my apologies for keeping everybody waiting tonight. I never take lightly your time. Also, I want to mention that, as you know, Yeshua Shmuel Eisenberg arranged for me to speak in different schools and different classes today. Two of those shiurim will make it onto Torah anytime. One is called The Power of Torah, and one is called The Crown of Torah. I think The Power of Torah is already on, or if it's not, it will be on soon. Both of them are already on YouTube. The Crown of Torah and The Power of Torah are already on YouTube. Says the Mishnah, Ganav Mishal Aviv, if he stole the money from his father, V'achal B'rishus Aviv, and ate in his father's house, he doesn't become a Ben Sarah, because it's hard for him to eat in his father's house because his father will stop him. So it's not going to become infectious behavior. Mishal acherim, if he stole from others, v'achal b'rishus acherim, and he ate on others' properties, that's also not a ben sarah because it's not easy to steal money from others. Mishal acherim, if he steals from others, v'achal b'rishus acherim, for sure ain't a nasa ben sarah. It has to be Adshe Yignav Mishalav, because that he has access to. He knows where his parents hide their money. V'yochel b'rishus acherim, and he finds a place to eat somewhere else where they're not going to stop him. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda says he's only chayiv if he steals both from his father and his mother. Adshe Yignav Mishal Aviv u'Mishal Imay. Now the Gemara is going to ask momentarily, how does his mother have money? How does his mother have money? So we'll see. And now the Gemara explains. If he steals from his father and eats it on his father's property, even though money is available, so he could steal that again, but he's afraid to eat by his father, so that's not going to become a habit for him. If he stole from others and ate by somebody else's place, to eat somewhere else he's not afraid, but to steal from others is not always available. Again, that won't be a habit forming. Because if it's tartel reyusa, if it's mishal acherim, he steals from others which are not available, where he's scared. He has both problems, that the money is not readily available and he's scared to do it by his father. That's a resource that's always available. He knows where his parents keep their money. And he eats somewhere else where he's not scared. The shchiach, that's money that's available, v'loi bois, and he's not afraid. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Yehud, Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, ad sheyignov mishal aviv u'mishal imay. He has to steal from both his father and his mother. And as I said, the question is, where does his mother have money? Kol masha kana isha kana baila, whatever a woman acquires, her husband acquires. So imay minole, where does his mother have money? Masha kansa isha kansa bala, whatever a wife acquires belongs to the husband. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina misuda hamuchenes la'aviv u'le'imay. It's a meal that's prepared for the father and mother. Now, the food that's put in front of the mother, the father relinquishes to her. That's her food. So he steals from the father and the mother, says the Gemara. But it has to be money, because we said that one of the prerequisites of a Ben Sarah Myra is that he has to buy the meat bezul, cheaply. Says the Gemara, V'amar Rabbi Chanan bar Malada, Amar Rav Huna, Ein achayiv ad sheyikna basa bezul, until he buys meat cheap, v'yoichel yayin bezul. So it's talking about money, not food. V'yishta. Ala ema mibdmei suda hamuchenes la'aviv l'imay. It was money that was reserved for the father and mother's meal. And again, money that's reserved, he gave her money for her restaurant meal, that money he relinquishes to her, and the child stole that money from her. Iba is saying, a woman could have money that somebody gives it, al manashe ein lebala rishusba. Da'akni la achar, somebody else transferred it to her, va'amala, and said to her, al manashe ein lebala rishusbam, on the condition that the husband doesn't have any rights in it.
It sounds like if they were divorced, that wouldn't be good. They have to be married.
Right, because it has to be einenu shemeh b'koleinu. They have to have a kol echad. If they're divorced, they don't have a kol echad. Now, ha'ya'aviv rights of imay einu rights. So they both have to bring him to Bezdin to have him executed. If the father wants to bring him to the Bezdin, but the mother doesn't want to, or aviv einu rights, the father doesn't want to be imay rights, einu nasa ben sarah mayra, he can't be executed. Akshu shnein rights, until they both want to bring him to Bezdin. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer im loyhaisa imay reuya la'aviv. Now the Gemara will translate to mean this to mean if the mother was not of the same height, voice, and appearance as the father, einay nasa ben sarah mayra. And so the Gemara is going to tell us that according to this, there never was a ben sarah mayra. Now, my eina ruya, what does it mean that she's not fit? That they were forbidden to be married to each other. But that doesn't affect, he's still a father and she's still a mother. That doesn't affect their identity. The fact that their marriage isn't good, the father is a father, and the mother is a mother. It means that the mother and the father have to be mamish like each other. Tanya nami hachi. We learn likewise. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, im loy ha'isa imay shavala aviv bekel ubamara ubekuma. If the mother is not similar to the father with his voice, with his appearance, and with his height, eina nasa ben sarah mayra. My time. What's the reason? The amakra einenu shemea bekelenu. He doesn't listen to our voice. That we both have a similar voice. And the Gemara says, with the kol ba'inan shava, usually kol mara and koma goes together. And since their voice has to be the same, their appearance and height nami ba'inan shava. Now, since that's very hard to imagine, especially since they're two different genders, that the man and the woman are the same. It never was and it never will be. And why was it written in the Torah only drosh v'kabel schar, only to darshan and get reward? Now, by the way, when the Gemara says drosh v'kabel schar, it doesn't mean that the whole thing is without purpose. There's a tremendous purpose. That the first 3 months after the bar mitzvah is very important, the chinuch that we give to our child. Those first 3 months, those formative months, have an impact on the child, the rest of the child's life. Droish means to expound it, and for the lessons that you get from it, kibel schar. It teaches us that the only chance a child has is when the father and the mother have the same voice, not when they're fighting all the time and one says the child one way and one says the child the other way. Then the child doesn't have a chance. So there's a lot of things that we learn, even though it never happened, but there's a lot of things that we learn from it. So who is it going like? Says the Gemara, like who does it go that Droish v'kabel schar, Kaman Kareb Yehuda, that they all have to be the same. Iba Yisayim, there's another opinion like this. Reb Shimon, the Tanya, Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon says, because this child ate a half a mun of meat, and had a half a lug of Italian wine, you think the father and mother is going to take him to be stoned? They're going to take their own flesh and blood to be stoned? What father and mother would do that? Take their own flesh and blood because he was a thief of some meat and wine and take him to be stoned. Rather, Reb Shimon says it never happened. It never happened. And why was it written? Only for us to expound the many lessons about chinuch, etc., and to get reward. However, Rabbi Yonason disagrees. Amar Rabbi Yonason, Ani Reisiv, I witnessed an execution of a Ben Sarah Meir, v'yashavti al kivroi, and I sat alongside his grave. And most of the Mefarshim say that doesn't mean he actually sat on the grave, but he sat alongside the grave. Kaman Ozla, like whom does it go? Hadisanya, Iranidachas, a city subverted after idolatry. That's a terrible thing, where a whole city goes astray after idolatry, and we behead the occupants of the city and burn all the property of the city. The Tanya Iranidachas, a subverted city, it never happened, and it never will happen. And why was it written? So again, Rabbi Yonason said, no, I saw it. Rabbi Yonason, I saw a whole city burnt down. Excuse me, I'm skipping over. I'm going back. Kaman also hadasani Iranidachas that Iranidachas never was and never will be. Kaman Kerebeliezer. The Tanya Rebeliezer Aimer Kol Ir Sheyesh Ba Filu Mezuzah Achas. Any city that has even one mezuzah, Eina Nasvis Iranidachas, cannot become a subverted city. My timer. On Makra, the pasuk says, "Ve'es kol shlola," all of its booty, tikbait al teich rechava, you bring into the city square, v'saraf the beish. Now you wouldn't be able to do that with a mezuzah. It contains Hashem's name, and b'keven di'i ke mezuzah lo yafshe. You can't burn the mezuzah, and for sure, if it has a sefer Torah or if it has a navi. You're supposed to burn idols. Don't do that to Hashem your God. So obviously, if it has one mezuzah, now since an Iranidachas is a city in Eretz Yisrael, it's not possible that there's a city that doesn't have at least one mezuzah in the entire city. Rabbi Yonason disagrees. Anira Isia, I saw a Iranidachas that was burnt down, v'yoshavti al tila, and I sat on its mound, on its heap of ash. According to whom does it go? Bayis hamenuga, a leprous house. We know that there's leprosy on the body, there's leprosy on the clothing, and there's also leprosy on the house, where you're supposed to, after checking that it didn't get better, you raise the house to the ground. So, Kaman Ozla, according to whom does it go? Hadisanya bayis hamenuga, a leprous house, loyhaya v'loyasid liyos. Never happened. V'lama nichtav, and why is the parasha written in the Torah? Only dreish v'kabel schar, only to learn from its lessons. There are lessons to be learned about talking Lashon Hara, not to talk Lashon Hara in the house. There are lessons to learn. Mitzayra is Maitzirah. Kaman Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, because Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon has impossible conditions in order for it to be a leprous house. The Tanya, Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, the house is not declared Tameh, ad sheyira kishtei grisen, until you see the amount of 2 split beans of red or green blotches, al shtei avonim, on 2 stones, b'shtei ksalim, on 2 walls, b'keren zavis. At the corner of the house, on 1 stone, on 1 wall, there's red and green blotches the size of a gris, connecting to another stone on the other corner, Orkai kishnei grisen, its length like 2 split beans, v'rach by kigris. Now, having that exact configuration, he says it never happened. Now, my time at Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, why does Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon say that we need these specifications? Because ksiv kir, it says saras on a wall, and it also says v'ksiv kiros, on walls. So one pasuk says wall, and one pasuk says walls. Ezel, what kind of a wall is like 2 walls? Ezel kir kishu kikiris havayom ezek karen zavis. That's when it's by a corner. So it's like one connecting wall going around the bend. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Elazar Reb Tzavik, Mokum haya b'tchum Aza. There was a place in Tchum Aza. Rabbi Elazar Reb Tzadok disagrees with Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. There was a place in the Tchum, within 2,000 amas of Aza, and they called it the room of the place that was locked up, the house that was originally locked up and then raised to the ground because it's a ras. Amar Reb Shimon ish kfar Akai, Pam achas halachti legalil. One time I traveled to the upper Galil, V'reisi mokim shemitzayin in Isai, and I saw a place where they had marked off the amru avonim menugas pinu l'sham, that stones from a leprous house was moved to that place. So it did happen. I want to welcome in Elliot Udell for our 30th Zoomer of the evening. I do have regards from everybody, from Mark Frankel, who I spoke to today, and he told me he was going to try to be on here today, but he told me that this night, the late night schedule is hard for him because he has to get up early in the morning, and he'll be back as soon as we get back to 8 o'clock. Tomorrow we have also a special event tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm giving a shiur here for the Young Israel of Deerfield, which actually Mark Frankel is sponsoring. Tomorrow the shiur is at 8 o'clock. Not this year. The shiur, which I'm going to put on Zoom, it's called Let's Get Ready for Purim. It will also be called for the Shabbos table Rosh Chodesh Adar. It's going to be a lengthy for the Shabbos table shiur. It'll be from 8 till approximately 9. The daf tomorrow night will be at 9:15. Now the reason why? Because it's going to be very difficult for me to bring my machinery from the Young Israel Hall and then back to my apartment and set up the cameras and everything. So I'm going to continue to give the daf over there in the Young Israel Shul, but there's going to be a little bit of hamantashin and stuff after the shiur. I don't want the people to make noise and interrupt our daf, So we'll have the Megillah shir from 8 to 9, and then as soon as the Olam clears out, maybe 9:10, whenever it is, we'll then start the daf. So that's the schedule for tomorrow night. I hope those that can will come to the Megillah shir. You'll find it very enjoyable, a very good way. It's called Let's Get Ready for Purim. I hope it's going to be a good share. I didn't prepare it yet, but I hope it's going to be a good share. Just in case you think that I'm, just playing pickleball over here in Florida, that's not the case. Today I didn't play pickleball at all. I was in Hollywood speaking to hundreds and hundreds of children, Baruch Hashem. It was really a wonderful experience. Okay, new Mishnah. If one of the parents was missing a hand, it says they have to be able to grab him with both hands. If one of them is missing a hand, or one of them is lame, it says they have to take him to the Bezdin, they have to walk to Bezdin. Or Elaine, or if one of them is mute, because they have to be able to say B'nai Nuzeh. Or Sumo, or one of them is blind, because they have to say this child, they have to see him. Or Cheresh, or one of them is deaf, so they can't say Einenu Shemeh B'Keleinu. They can't hear that he's not listening to their voice. Einu Nasis Ben Sarah Meir, can't become a Ben Sarah Meir. Shenemar V'Safsil B'Yaviv Imay, they have to grab him. V'Loi Gidmin, not without hands. V'Oitzi Oisai, they have to be able to bring him. V'Loi Chigrin, not if they're lame. V'Amru, they have to be able to say B'nai Nuzeh Ben Sarah Meir. V'Loi Ilmin, they can't be mute. B'nai Nuzeh, they have to be able to see him, this son. V'Loi Sumu, not if they're blind. Einenu Shemeh B'Keleinu, he's not listening to our voice. V'Loi Chershin, not if they're deaf, so they can't hear his response. Masrin by B'fnei Shleisha, they warn him in front of 3. The Gemara will amend this and say that they only have to warn him in front of 2. Or Malkin Oisai, and then the first time he eats the meat and the wine, they give a Malchus in front of 3, in front of a Bezdin. And then Chazer V'Kilkel, if he sins again, Nidain B'Esrim Shleisha, then that's already a capital crime. They have to judge him with a Bezdin of 23. Ve'inai Niskal, and he's not stoned. Actually, Yusham Shleisha Rishainim. In the 23 have to be the original 3 Dayanim. Shinen Mar B'neinu Zeh, this child, Zeh Shaloka B'fneichem, this one that was flogged in front of them. So the Gemara says, from the fact that we need every detail in the pasuk, Shma Mino Ba'inan Kra K'dichsiv, whatever the pasuk says is Ma'akev, even b'diavad. You need to have exact details as the pasuk says. No, not always. Shani hacha, it's different over here because all those words were extra. Shani hacha, the kulei kra yiseru, all the words were extra. Umasrin b'fnei shleisha, one line from the top of daf ayin aleph from the base. I don't know if you noticed, but these dafim are rather large. And don't forget, the evening is yet very young, because tonight we have the Chumash Shir. I know Barry has been waiting the entire week for the Chumash Shir. He's been telling you he's sitting there with bated breath for the Chumash Shir. Umasrin b'fnei shleisha, and we warn him in front of 3 people. Why do we have to warn in front of 3 people? Lomali, betray sag. It's enough to have two people warn him. Amar Abaya, it's enough to have 2 witnesses. That's all you need, witnesses. Amar Abaya, no hachi kama. Masrim by b'fnei shnayim. We warn him in front of two witnesses. And then, if we're going to flog has to be done with a court. Or malkin I say b'fnei shleisha. Mal says the Gemara, where do we find Malchus by a Ben Sarah Myra? Malchus by Ben Sarah Myra heicha ksiva. Where does it say flogging? We know execution. But where does it say flogging? Kid Rabbi Avo. The Amar Avo, the din is that the Moitzi Shemra, the one that defames a girl and says that he didn't find her virginity, is flogged. Lamanu v'yisru, it says by Moitzi Shemra v'yisru, and it says v'yisru by Ben Saira Amira, the Yisroi mi Ben, and then it also says by Ben Saira Amira Ben, or Ben mi Ben, and it says by Malchus im bin Hakkoi Sarasha. Im bin Hakkoi Sarasha. So actually, the reason why it tells us about B'Yisrael is just to tell us that that's how we know that the defamer gets Malchus. If it's just for Ben Sarah Myra, we would just say that we learn out Ben from Ben. It says Ben Sarah Myra, and it says in Bin Hakkoi Sarasha if he's worthy to be flogged. Chazav Kilkel, if he sins again, Nidain B'Chav Gimel. He's judged with a bezdin of 23. Because it says B'neinu Zeh, this child that we already witnessed the flogging. Says but we learned out from B'neinu Zeh that they can't be blind. That they have to be able to see him and not a blind person. Says the Gemara, Imke Lichtav B'neinu Hu. He's the one that was flogged. My B'neinu Zeh, when it says Zeh, Shma Min Otarte. We learn both. We learn that he has the part of the 23 has to be the original 3 judges that saw him flogged, and also that the parents have to be able to see him to say, this child. Now, says the Gemara, Barach ad shaloi nigmar dinai. If he fled before he was convicted, and then va'achakach, when we finally found him, hikif zakei natachtain, he already has pubic hairs ringing the base of his male organ. He's not eligible to be convicted anymore. It's past his age, but however, ve'imish enigma dinai barach, if he fled after he was convicted. Now, once he was convicted, he's a dead man. And then he has pubic hair ringing around his base of his male organ, because he was already convicted at the right time. So now the Gemara goes off into a tangent. An interesting shaila. Somebody that's a Noahide committed blasphemy. Okay, he was a Noahide. He committed blasphemy, and then he converted. Now, when he was a Noahide and he committed blasphemy, he would be executed by Sayef. He would have been beheaded. Then he converted. Do we still execute him? Interesting question. So the Gemara says no, because everything changes when he converts. The laws change, because a Ben Noach you could execute with one witness, with one judge, without warning. Now as a Jew, he needs witnesses, he needs a court of 23, he needs to be warned, and it's a different execution. The execution of a Noahide is beheading, and the execution of a Jew is stoning. So that's what the Gemara says. Let's see it inside. Rab Chanina, Ben Noach shebirei kes Hashem, a Noahide that blasphemes Hashem, v'achakach niskayir, and then he converts potter. Hoyel v'nishtana dinai, and the correct years over is hoyel v'nishtana dinai v'nishtana misasai. Both his law changes, because now you need 2 Eidim, you need Asra, you need a Bezdin of 23, and also the execution changes, because as a Noahide he would be beheaded, and now he would be stoned. So the Gemara says, well, name a Messiah. Let's deduce a proof from our Mishnah. Barachat shaloi nigmar dinai, if he fled, if the Ben Sarmar fled before he was convicted, and afterwards he has pubic hairs around his base of his organ, when we find him, potter. Isn't because he changed. My time will have mishum damrinon hoyel v'ishtani ishtani. So the Gemara says, loy, shani hacha, that's different, because now when we want to convict him, the iyobed hashtan, now if he would do it now, la barkatolu, he's not liable for death anymore. It's over zmanai, it's past the time. So it has nothing to do with our case. Tajma, if after he was convicted he fled, and then he got the pubic hairs around the base of his organ, chayiv. So you see, even though he changed, he's chayiv. Second one, no, that's different. Nigma dinai karmet. If he was convicted, he's already a dead man. Nigma dinai gaver katilu. He's already a dead man. It's different. He was Jewish. Tajma. Oh, so now this is already a more analogous comparison. Tajma. I want to again, by the way, I'm not taking it for granted that everybody amended 29 Zoomers. Everybody amended their schedule to work with my time. I know for a lot of people, it's very hard. Irving gets up very early in the morning. Dov Solkowitz gets up very, very early in the morning. I know that it's not easy, so I really appreciate. Avigdor is still davening with Seekin, right? So Avigdor gets up very early in the morning.
Yes.
So very.
It's challenging, yeah.
But in Yitz Hashem, starting Monday night, we're back to 8 o'clock. In Yitz Hashem, I should have a safe trip back. Starting Monday night, we're back to 8 o'clock. It's almost the morning, 8 o'clock. But anyway, I expect you to all bring with you another person that Marshall should be able to get his bourbon already. He's very thirsty. And again, remember, Rabbi, so just remember, tomorrow night at 8 p.m. is going to be a special shir. Let's get ready for Purim. And then at about 9:10 will be the daf. Okay. So says the Gemara, now the Gemara makes an analogy as follows. Tajma, ben noyach shehike es chaveroi, and Rashi says that this means a ben noyach killed a guy, or baal eshes chaveroi, or committed adultery with a married goya. I'm not saying shiksa. Rapam did not like shiksa. She said you shouldn't call a Goyish woman a shiksa. She's a tzelem elikim. You don't call a tzelem elikim a sheketz. Rapam was very, very makbid about that. So, but anyway, he killed a Goyish man, or he committed adultery with a Goyish woman, v'nizgayer, and he converted potter. Why? Because if he would do this now as a Jew, he wouldn't be chayiv misa for that. But also can be Yisrael, but if a guy killed a Jewish man, or committed adultery with a Jewish woman, v'niskayer chayiv. Oh. V'amai. Name ahoyel v'ishtani yishtani. Why do we say that the din changed? And initially it was enough with one witness, now you need 2 witnesses, now you need a bezdin of 23. Says the Gemara, no, the only time he's potter is if both things change, the din and the execution. Dinai umisasai ba'inan. V'hai, and in this case, if he killed a yid when he was a guy, or he slept with a Jewish married woman when he was a guy, Dina yishtani, the din changed, but misasai lo yishtani, but the execution didn't change. So Gemara says that's not true by both of them. Bishleima reitzayach, a benayach that kills gets beheaded, and a Jewish murderer also gets beheaded. So Bishleima reitzayach made karasayach v'ashtasayach. So the execution didn't change. Ela Eishes Ish, it's not true. When he's a ben noyach for adultery, he gets sayif. But for adultery, when you're a Jew, you get chenek. Ela Eishes Ish mei koras sayif. Initially, there's beheading, v'ashta chenek, and now it's strangulation. Says you want to know, it's talking about a nara hamarasa, a betrothed maiden. A betrothed maiden, both a Noahide and a Jew get skila. That's a machlokes, but there's one opinion that way. The Aidi v'Aidi b'skila. So it says the Gemara, v'osa kain b'Yisrael. It says if he did this with a Jew, the same way he did it with a Goya. It has to be analogous to the Goya, and by a Goya there's no Erison. V'osa kain b'Yisrael dum yadei sheschaveira ketani. And there's no Erison by a Goy. Ella, the Gemara says, you're right. When he was beheaded, when he was a Noahide, he was beheaded. And as a Jew, he would get strangulation. But since beheading is more severe than strangulation, so it's included, because as a Noahide, he would be beheaded, and that's even worse than strangulation. And now as a Jew, strangulation is easier. That's not considered a change. Kala b'chamura, the more lenient punishment of strangulation is included in beheading. Meishich Shaycha, says the Gemara, Hani chel rabbanan nimrei sayif chomer. That's good if you hold that beheading is more severe. That strangulation is more severe. So here you have a change in execution and a change in din. Reb Shimon Reb Shimon says there's no change. He holds that all Noahites get strangled, and therefore for adultery as a Noahide he would be strangled, and an adultery with a Jew would be strangled. There's no change. But then we're going to have a problem with murder. Because as a Noahide, if he murdered, he gets chenek. But as a Jew, he gets beheaded. But murder may karachenek. As a Noahide, according to Reb Shimon, he would be strangled. So the Gemara says, yeah, but we said, Kala b'chamura meisha shaycha. The more easy is included in the more heavy. So we don't have a proof yet to our din when it changes the law and it changes the execution. If he converts, he doesn't get executed. Lema Messiah, Sircha, if a Nara Marasa sins, Ba'achakach Bogra, and then afterwards she becomes a Bogris, that means she sinned between the age of 12 and 12 and a half, actually 12 in one day and 12 and a half in one day. But before we execute her, she became 12 and a half in 2 days. So then, Tidoin Bechenek, she gets strangled, the regular punishment of adultery. Beskila my time aloi. What's the reason she doesn't get skila? La mishum doyel v'yishtani yishtani. Since she changed. Because she came hoch, and then of course in this case, where a Noahide, where Noahide did blasphemy, the ishtani legamre, when he converts, it's different rules and also different execution. Says the Gemara, it's not true. The law is wrong, so it's no proof. The din is that if a Nara Marasa commits adultery, and then she becomes a Bogris afterwards, we punish her after the time she did the adultery, and she gets skila. She gets skila and not chenek. So it's no raya that because she changed. Now, maybe in the case of the Ben Noach that commits the blasphemy, it's different because it changes all the way, but the Gemara does not prove it one way or the other. Okay, now we're going to have the Chumash.